So we have quite a diverse panel for you as well. It's a mix of a variety of topics. I'm really glad that we have some experts here that are going to tell you all about sustainability, AI, and blockchain. There's a lot of mix, but we have some great experts that I hope in 40 minutes are going to be able to crunch all these numbers for you. And yeah, we'll take it from there. So Michele, I think you're our moderator, so I'll let you bring the panel together. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for being here. We will do, a bit of energy. We have our first panelist, Alvaro, on the second chair. And then Yvonne Ann on the third one. Daniel on the second to last, and Romain. Thank you. So I'm Michele. I'm the chair of the Sustainability Working Group at Crypto Valley Association. And I wanted to put together, a panel at the intersection of blockchain, AI, and sustainability, taking the perspective that on the one hand, there's always an increasing need, particularly when it comes from an European perspective of sustainability data for sustainability reporting, regulations, green directive, nature restoration law, so an increasing number of regulations which are really sustainability data intensive. On the other hand, also taking the perspective of understanding and being aware that there is a significant business value also around sustainability data. So yeah, for this reason, we put together this nice range of different experiences. So I'll be happy for you to maybe starting with Alvaro, just respecting the order, to quickly introduce yourself and from this perspective, starting from the issue perspective. I mean, what are the biggest challenges and difficulties when it comes to data, independently, from the blockchain and the sustainability perspective in your respective industry?
All right, great. So I'm Alvaro. So I'm Senior Innovation Lead at what we call Switzerland for UNHCR. Switzerland for UNHCR, think of it as a kind of a joint venture, which is a Swiss foundation, part of the UN Refugee Agency. But this status actually allows us to test things, and then that will be later scaled up. So in terms of data, UNHCR is a big provider of data and collector of data. Our perspective as Switzerland for UNHCR is really to connect with the private sector in Switzerland and working on innovation on that. So our perspective is a lot into philanthropy, a lot into really how to find fundraising solutions for today. And for us, this data that is available for us today is, at least on the projects I'm working on, is we see a lot of potential in the gathering data for everything that has to do with traceability, reporting, that if you think about it, the way we do reporting today hasn't changed much since the 70s, and it's very, not really cost efficient. So we're really excited in seeing how this data collection and how we can use this data to actually improve and become like a kind of a gateway to make the way we work more efficient.
Yeah. About your side, Yvonne?
So I'm Yvonne Ann, Director of Research at DFINITY, the foundation that is the main contributor to the Internet Computer. And for those of you that are not familiar with the Internet Computer, it's a decentralized cloud platform. And actually at 3:30 there will be an exciting demo. If you want to see more of what is possible, what kind of compute you can do on the Internet Computer, come then. With respect to data, what I see at DFINITY, but also what I've seen in previous roles in industrial research, I think it's super important to be in control and to know exactly who can access what kind of data, who can do what to your data, so it's not just lying around. We want to do something with it, so who can do what, and how to do this efficiently and in a privacy-preserving way is dear to my heart.
Yeah. Daniel, what's your take on this?
Myself, I'm Daniel Jog, CEO of ENERHASH. We are an energy tech company, so I'm coming from a little bit different part of the data management. We are working with a lot of large-scale utilities and oil and gas companies to implement different energy solutions. We develop flexible energy systems, computing infrastructure, and basically flare gas recovery systems for oil and gas companies. My part at the data is that we work directly with the largest emitters of the world, and we see how much data they actually don't have. So when they don't have the data, you know, there is no problem. So we are working on it, like how to reduce the not existing emissions, let's say, and make it accountable, and how to, you know, scale it on a larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, Romain Castillo. So I've been working around 20 years in the financial industries in various roles, and most recently I'm a director at Swiss Sustainable Finance, which is a large association in Switzerland trying to help the financial services sector transitioning into more sustainable practices, so sustainable financing or sustainable investing more specifically. And when it comes to your question, Michele, about data and the challenges that we see, my answer will not relate that much to my own organization, because it's a small organization and the data challenges are pretty simple, but more to what we see in the financial services industry are the typical issues of market participants. And here I think there are like 3 or 4 things, and especially in relation to sustainability data or sustainable finance data. The first thing is, in that industry, you have more and more reporting requirements. So you are supposed more and more to report higher volumes of data, which are supposed to be more granular, you know, your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, etc. So there is a challenge in finding the data and providing it to your clients and your stakeholders. In order to do that, you need to get the data. You have a dependency on what people provide you. And here there is a lot of issues on availability of data. So that's basically echoing what you were saying. Very often, you just don't find the data you need to forward to your own stakeholders or investors. So there is a big issue in availability of data. There is a big issue in the quality of data, because sometimes you have data, but it's basically a rough estimate. On 1 or 2 years down the road, once you have refined your assumptions, you realize suddenly that the 200 you had reported 2 years before, actually it was like 120. It's too bad. You have to restate it. So you have the availability issue, you have the quality issue. You have the sourcing issue, because you have lots of different sources of data which are heterogeneous, and very often the reports and the sources you use do not use the same format. They are inconsistent with each other, so you cannot really compare. You need to, you know, rebrand, restate the whole stuff. And that's mostly external challenges. And the last challenge I have in mind is an internal one, which is, I think, specific to large FS organizations, which is basically that your own systems are very fragmented. You have lots of databases, and very often the data you need is scattered in different databases that don't connect to each other. That's something I've seen quite often. That's specifically the typical challenges I can see, and I can guess you guys have seen something similar.
Yeah, that's interesting. So to see somehow some themes which are recurring, you know, availability of data, quality of data, efficiency in obtaining data, and management of data, you know, who can access it, you know, the different layers, privacy layers. So, I mean, now let's get somehow to the meat of the discussion, you know. So from your perspective, starting from Alvaro, what's like your take on, you know, blockchain and AI to be helpful in, you know, overcoming these difficulties we just mentioned?
So with blockchain and AI, I mean, as I was mentioning, we're a very big provider of data that we use, for example, displacement data, data about like the way we manage, for example, refugee camps, the number actually in June every year, all the media is actually waiting for the official like statement of how many refugees you have around the world. So it's really around June 20th that you get like this global report on the number of internally displaced, number of people who were actually displaced as a refugee around the world. So we are a big provider of data. The thing that happens is that, and in our role of connecting with the private sector, finding philanthropy solution, financial, you know, like impact investment, is that how do we get this data to match, to be good enough to be used in philanthropy and other things. So I would say that blockchain and AI in two different ways helps us focus on the right data and how do we bring it. So we're developing solutions like, okay, predictive analysis of where, for example, help will be needed the most in some areas of the world, to have, like, for example, an emergency preparedness fund to be set up to know that something, cool happened there. Also, for example, accompanying our donors, like really this predictive, they've been funding this, they'll be interested with this by this as well, And on the blockchain, for us, and that's really, we started with blockchain actually, before actually AI. Yeah. For blockchain, for us, is really this transparency. A lot of donors are asking for transparency. They're asking, okay, how do you spend my money? How do you spend the funds? I don't have to remind you the latest news all around. They're asking for more and more scrutiny, more transparency from everywhere. And even if not all countries and not all private sector actors are asking for that kind of transparency, blockchain is a good way and efficient way, in some cases, to provide this, and at a cost-efficient way. Because you have to imagine if sometimes for some donations of some funds we receive, if we spend like 30% of the total amount in reporting what we did with the funds, that doesn't really make sense. So, yeah.
And I'm curious, so from that perspective, I guess you need to work on a lot of assumptions. Is it better to have bad data or no data at all? I don't know whether that's, I guess, maybe a recurring question on your side. For you, or follow up on you. If
that's a really good question. Actually, wrong data, definitely not. Not enough data. Let's see again if technology today helps us to use it. But I think even for questions of engagement, which is a very big part of what we're trying to do, at least from Switzerland, in the global north, with audiences in the global north. Even some data, so we can use it and make things out of it. I think of, for example, we did a fundraiser with Christie's last year, and we used some of the asylum seekers data from the biggest economy in the world, and we did even an artwork with hands opening and closing, depending on the percentage of asylum requests that were accepted. And if the percentage was increasing, the hand will open and then it will actually close down. That was a very successful example of how you can actually use data in a different way. But I will say that more than no data, I would say that wrong data is what we don't want. Even a little bit we can always find ways to use it.
Yeah. Okay, can I jump in here, maybe, Michele? Because your question, I like your question because it made me think of a French joke, which I'm going to try and translate, which is, do you prefer to have a 10-meter long arm or a leg made out of foam, right? And basically, you don't want neither nor, right? So do you prefer to have bad data or no data? It's an impossible choice. My guess, or what I've seen in the industry in most cases, is there are specific points you have to report. It's required to report data. In these cases, if you don't have an exact data, you need to make your best estimate. It's your best will, basically. And at some point, you have to restate it. You have no choice. You just do that. In other cases where you don't have a best estimate available, I would tend to think that it's better not to report something than to report something that you know almost with certainty is probably BS. So that's probably where I would draw the line,
Yeah. And from a data perspective, then, I was wondering, when it comes to assumption, if you, in many occasions, you slightly change some parameters and you get a huge range. How do you deal with that? So when it comes, for example, to climate measures, just a small changes in assumptions in the model can dramatically change, the range basically of data. So I was wondering, how would you deal with that?
It's a tough one. What I can say is, so there is no right solution. What I see is this modeling is being refined over time. And for example, if you take the climate modeling as an example, what we look at in our industry, the financial services industry, is when you set up investment products or when you package specific portfolios, to which scenario, to which warming scenario do you align? So you're the well-known 1.5 scenario, the 2-degree scenario, or other scenario, right? And when you look at the data over the years, it's quite interesting, maybe not positive, but interesting to see that the trend is not to have more and more responses in the 1.5 bucket. And that's because people might have the intention to align to 1.5 target, but over the years, they simply realize when the data gets more accurate, more complete, more fine, that actually it's not as positive as I thought. So you see a small trend going from 1.5 to 2, not because people per se want less commitment, but simply because the data they have gives them a different evidence. So I think there is no way around it, that actually you refine your modeling over time, and maybe it's going to tell you something that's less optimistic than you thought at first. And that's what I'm seeing happening in the past 5-6 years.
I see.
I was mentioning at the beginning part that they actually don't have data. So we work with quite a few oil companies, mostly government-owned state oil companies, in order to reduce the emission. And when we get to a field, you can see these huge flare stacks burning there, which is like one of the largest emitters, basically globally. It's more than 500 million tons of CO2 emissions globally on a yearly basis. And when we ask them, okay, how much do you flare? And they were like, we don't know. We like, it seems like a lot, and 30,000 cubic meter a day, and when you actually make measurements, sometimes it's 200,000 instead of 30,000, and then you ask like, okay, but what's the composition, how you measure it, and how you declare your emissions? Is self-declaration, but they don't even know the data, how much they're emitting, and then they come then the ministry asks, well, how much is the emission? It's 5. Okay, who cares? Because nobody is checking. There is no measurement on the fields. Nobody goes there. Nobody is measuring. There were a couple of systems now, because you can actually measure it if you want to. But nobody wants it, because once you measure it, then you are accountable for it. So if you measure it, then they can show, this is your emission, this is how much you reduce. If you're not doing anything, then it's your fault. And it turned out sometimes the emissions were 16 times higher compared to what they declared. But on average, it's 2-3 times higher when they actually measure it from helicopters and so on, and they can actually measure the methane emissions. So when we come to the data, in order to create the data, there is a big lack of real information and measurements of the systems, like how much is the real emissions of productions, for example.
But I think there will also be a change, and with the regulation that is coming, there will be also more pressure to actually measure more. And in certain areas, we see that already. So, for example, cities and governments are trying to be more accountable, at least in some parts of the world. And also there are a lot of creative ways of measuring some data. So I've just yesterday heard from a startup that builds on the internet computer that they are working with cities that collect CO2 values around the city with buses. So the buses drive around anyways. So they equip them with measurement stations and measure where in the city there are different microclimates and different emissions. So I think this challenge that we are facing, it can also be with creative solutions. Maybe we can tackle at least some part of it.
I really believe in it, but
it's going to be a tough one.
It's really tough one, because when we are dealing with these companies, who are the regulators in the given country?
Then
is the owners of the oil companies who are running the country and regulate, and then comes to why you penalize yourself, and you are producing and you have the emissions and you don't want to declare, and then it's like a circle, and all the oil companies and 54 governments signed all the zero routine flaring decree. For example, there is some regulation that until 2030 they need to stop to zero. Last year it increased 7%. So in 15 years they didn't decrease anything, and they don't even know the data yet. So they have a couple of years left. I really hope, because that would be a high pressure on them, and they would really need to make something to stop, emissions. So if there is some regulation, that's always really good, because maybe they will actually want to do something then.
But
I really hope so.
that being said, I mean, yeah, we are still looking quite a lot into the issue part. I would be interested to hear like the solution part, the blockchain, the AI part, how you see that can somehow help, you know. For example, I was connecting Daniel to the fact you mentioned before of people actually probably not being willing to put data in the blockchain because once it's there, you know, you are starting to become transparent and maybe you don't want to be transparent. But then what are the use cases? I mean, not just for you, Daniel, for whomever, where actually blockchain and AI is already helping from this perspective.
I can try to jump in on that one. I'm going to focus more on the AI side because that's what I'm working on the use cases I've seen in the industry. First thing to be really clear, we've been discussing here a few issues, right, around availability, quality, etc. Clearly, when there is no data, AI or blockchain is not going to invent it for you. Right? So if it's not there, it's not there. So there won't be a solution to that issue of availability except once it's being produced. But when we take the next step where we say, okay, we have some data, right? Now we need to work on it and we need to assess it. We need to make use of it for our estimate, scenarios, computation. I think the best use I've seen in the industry, maybe I take a step back. We are at SSF working on a big publication on AI on sustainable finance. And among others, we have been surveying the whole market, the whole financial services industry, on what the use cases are. So what I'm trying to describe here is a bit of a summary of what we observe across the market. It's not one specific company, it's more an industry thing. And what I've seen are solutions around extraction, relatively obviously, right? So you can automate extraction and make it much more efficient. That's relatively useful in a world where you have to deal with always higher volumes of data, right? So it's not assessing the quality, but it's managing the workload that you have to extract your data from the sources and put in your own report. So here you have more and more solutions being used by the industry to extract. The second thing, and that's a super important one, I think that's even the most important one in my view, any AI system or any report will only be as good as the data you feed to it. And as we were saying earlier, we have lots of issues in the quality of that data or the comparability or the consistency of that data. And there are a few solutions out there, not many, but a few solutions AI-based which do plausibility checks on the data you extract from various sources. By doing these plausibility checks, saying, for example, okay, we have these emissions data from that company. If I know I compare this data to the previous years of the same company, or I compare to other companies in the same sector, or to other companies with the same number of employees, or same capex, or same industry, or same country, is it plausible? Right. By doing that, you can feed a huge number of data into a plausibility check, and you can select the data source which seems the most reliable one. So again, not helping with availability, but helping with cleaning the quality. And then obviously in the later stage, and I'm going to stop there, otherwise I'm too long, but in the later stage, we have then the next step, which is about getting insights out of it and putting them in reports. And maybe we'll have time to talk about it. But when it comes about the issues we were speaking about earlier, you know, on the quality, etc., I think that's the two main things I see, dealing with the volumes and then doing quality checks, making sure then in your own database, you have stuff you can really use and you can start building on that for your own reports and your own deliverables.
I would also like to report on some examples. So I fully agree with the problem with the data that you base your computation on. It doesn't make sense, then good luck with the result. So, but yeah, there I think AI can really help with plausibility checks. So I would like to mention two examples, one more from the environmental side and the other one more on economic or societal. So on the environmental side, in addition to the bus example, there's also a startup that builds a charging infrastructure that is powered by blockchain-driven incentives. So everything is super transparent. You can earn rewards for offering charging possibilities and also being involved in the revenue that is being generated. So it really helps to move from towards more e-mobility, which I think as a whole, while we on this planet, we are going in this direction, but there's still quite a long way. So I think having the right incentives can definitely help, and making sure that the batteries are being used in an efficient way. So that's one use case. And then the other one is about small and micro loans in developing countries. So there we are actually working with UNDP on a project that will make it much easier for small enterprises or individuals to get loans by streamlining processes involving blockchain technology that will make sure that things are more transparent, that there's less possibility for corruption, and that also makes things much more efficient. And I think there are a ton of use cases out there where we can really benefit from blockchain, but also from AI to make this world a better place.
Yeah, I like the part of rewards, because I believe from that perspective, blockchain infrastructure can be really helpful in creating a reward system, with tokenomics and similar elements. Therefore, I was wondering whether you have some examples or some comments on the question of somehow getting people rewarded to assure the quality of the data, or to somehow create data, or if you find any interesting connection, feel free to jump on this.
We're actually working, if I may say, and you were talking about UNDP, sister agency. We actually, for us, data and blockchain through blockchain and AI is an enabler. So we're really opening like new ways of working, being more efficient, or new ways of funding. In our case, the first straightforward first solution that came up with blockchain, for example, was payments. We're talking about crisis situations. How do you send money somewhere in the middle of a crisis of war? So when the Ukraine invasion took place, we partnered up with a blockchain, Stellar and USDC, and to be able to for refugees to cash out if they were in Poland in zlotys, any MoneyGrams, or in Germany in euros. So this kind of data, instead of shipping, because we still, for example, nowadays in the humanitarian sector, you still have like planes flying in and out with pallets full of cash, which in terms of security can be questionable, right? So this kind of data is super important for us to see, for example, if everyone cashes out everything on the same spot, well, something is weird, right? So you can actually investigate what's happening in that area, for example. But then we're also working on offsetting, like impact certificates, to show, again, this transparency. And last but not least, we're working also on a project of changing the way people do fundraising as well, like donating, by incentivizing donation and actions and rewarding them with tokens. But they don't know it's tokens. They just get, it's like a loyalty card.
Yeah, many times that's the solution which is somehow suggested to the business industry in the perspective of, using Web3, but without even, telling the user they're using Web3. And I'm a bit aware of time. If you just have, maybe we can take a couple of questions, but if each of you can conclude, with a thought, or a burning element they wanted to raise before, closing the panel.
You are the best.
Of course, it's on me. That's a tough one. It's something smart. I think two things first, because we are here at an event where we're talking about AI on blockchain, right? So my first thought would be that the typical interaction I can imagine between the two technologies would be leveraging on the first one, which main benefit is around safe, secure, non-penetrable storage, I would say. On the second one, about driving on providing insights out of large data sets. On here, if I try to put that together and link it to the topic of sustainability, which is sustainability on sustainability data, I think there are a couple of use cases around the setup of specific products like sustainability linked loans, which could leverage, AI to monitor the progress of certain conditions, and then could feed, for example, a smart contract to then execute on the conditions on the loan and provide the discount payment to the borrower. So that, I think there are a couple of use cases here which could maybe emerge over time under a number of conditions. On maybe more broadly, I think when it comes to new technologies, and now I'm speaking specifically about the industry I know, the financial services industry, right? That's what I know most. I think there's still a lot of way ahead, right? Most of these new technologies are used still in very early stage. AI, for example, is used mostly for natural language processing, a bit of sentiment analysis and reports. There is a lot of stuff that can still be done when it comes to assessing and monitoring client preferences, client interactions, designing products by mixing Gen AI and Pred AI and that type of things. So I think we are really just at the beginning. On that, there is under conditions on using the right data, etc., a huge potential for these technologies to be used much more massively in the next few years. That would be my forward-looking view on my end.
Any other concluding point or?
Let's go step by step. Yeah. So on my part, I really hope that there will be more regulation in the near future, because that would really help on the quality of the data, that they would actually make some measurement on the emissions, and that would help us really develop a lot more, because when there is not a pain, they don't really want to do anything like in real cases. So, but if you have data, there is a pain, because then you can see the actual data. And the more blockchain there is in the system, because we operate a lot of blockchain and AI infrastructure, but hardware infrastructure that can be utilized also for like basically mitigating the emissions and reduce the wasted resources and connect to where it's not used. So I hope we can run a lot more data basically on the infrastructure in the future, because that will be really helpful for every industry, basically. Yeah.
And I would also like to say a few words regarding, it's not just blockchain and AI. I think we can also use blockchain for AI, because the transparency that we've heard mentioned quite a few times today, I think also for AI this will be super important, that we can really trust that the things that the AI tells us is the truth, is really computed correctly. So I hope that the blockchain transparency benefits can be used on AI as well.
Yeah.
As a note, I would say that yes, in our case, in the humanitarian sector, I mean, technology in general, new technologies is disruptive, can be scary. Given the situation, we can't not afford not to explore new ways. But one thing that we often see is that by trying to do too many things, actually, you were talking about pain points. We've got only pain points. We only have challenges to solve. So, and actually that's our role also, to look out there in the private sector, in academia, to see, okay, what solutions already exist and how can we adapt it to solve the pain points that we have. And yeah, if you want more pain points, just come to see me. I'll give you.
Yeah, interesting one. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. Please.
Thank you very much for your insights. So there's a distinction between potential and what gets done, right? And in that sense, whatever gets in terms of data, like you mentioned, is also the quality of what we get out. So in terms of the quality of the ingredients, how do you see, also considering the current geopolitical developments, the investment into streamlining and standardizing the collection of sustainability-related data?
So what's the question exactly? How do we see what in relation to the collection of sustainability-related data? The evolution or?
The investment into streamlining, standardizing the collection processes.
Whether it's worth it, you mean? Or,
globally.
Okay, I will give it a try, and maybe my colleagues can jump in. There is a lot of talk about, the ESG backlash and the ESG fatigue, and you cannot open your newspaper every day without having the face of Donald Trump everywhere. And of course, you think of build, baby drill, and all sustainability is dead. But basically, very interestingly, when you look at the development of the requirements on sustainability reporting across the world, they actually tighten absolutely everywhere. US is the exception. It's the huge market. I don't deny it, and it's a topic. But I think it would be probably a misperception due to large media coverage to think that it's something that's happening everywhere and that it's just going backward everywhere. There is a generic trend that will, I think, continue with bumps on the road to get that transparency simply because we need it, not because people really want it, because it's constraining and it's also economically constraining, because you need it simply to maintain your economy over the longer term. So over time, these requirements to get more data, to get more transparency, and to overcome these challenges that we've discussed on availability, they will be there. So investing in solutions to get that data, to process it, and to deal with that is worth it. Because despite the impression we might have right now, it's not going to get away anytime soon. It's just going to have maybe a few hiccups, but it's going to continue going in that direction. So the investment is definitely worth it. We're not going to go away with that. That's my personal view.
I also think standardization will help the economies in general, because then they won't have to reinvent the wheel, but can really communicate and exchange data with each other. So I think pushing for standardization also is something that we should definitely do, and not just hoping that some big leaders somewhere will have the good solutions, but all of us, who we vote for, what the kind of things we buy, this has an influence. It's not just the big government somewhere, so we should not forget that.
Yeah, I like it as, I believe, as somehow a concluding message. And I mean, before we thank our beautiful panelists, I wanted to let you know at the Sustainability Working Group, we are pretty much interested on questions around decentralized AI, how the two can work together. So reach out if you're interested in doing something together, and prepare your hands for a big round of applause for our panelists.